This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 445, Drupal Bounty Program. On today's show, we are talking about the Drupal Bounty Program, how it supports innovation, and how you can get involved with guest Alex Moreno. We'll also cover WebProfiler as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Our guest today is Alex Moreno. He is the Innovation Program Manager in the Drupal Association with a background as a computer scientist majoring in artificial intelligence back in the 2000s. With nearly 2 decades of experience in software, a big part of those years deeply involved with Drupal, Alex is passionate about developer relations with an extensive experience in public speaking and community engagement with deep links in the Drupal community. Alex, welcome to the show and thank you for joining us.
Sure. Thanks for inviting me. Pretty excited about this.
I'm Nick Laughlin, founder at Enlightened Development, and today my co-hosts are John Picozzi, Solution Architect at EPAM.
Hello, Internet friends.
Also joining us for the next 4 weeks as guest host, Matt Glauman, Principal Software Engineer at Acquia. Matt has been using Drupal since 2012. He currently maintains PHP Stan Drupal and is the primary contributor to the Drupal Rector project, two tools which are used in Drupal's major version upgrade process, especially for Contrib. Although I've been seeing recently, they've been using it a lot more to help refactor kind of big swaths of core as well. Is that new or is it just I've been seeing it?
That is new and being led by Bjorn to help migrate from plugin annotations and PHP doc blocks to using attributes to PHP 8. So it's been really exciting to see.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And now to talk about our module of the week, let's turn it over to Martin Anderson-Klutz, a senior solutions engineer at Acquia and a maintainer of a number of Drupal modules of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, Nick. Have you ever wanted to get detailed performance data for the pages on your Drupal sites? There's a module for that. It's called WebProfiler, and it was created in January of 2014 by Luca Lusso of Italy, who was a guest on this show in episode 425. Has a 10.1.5 version available, which works with Drupal versions 10.1.2 or newer. It is actively maintained. In fact, that latest release just came out on February 1st of this year. It has security and test coverage and doesn't have much in the way of documentation, but the module is largely a wrapper for the Symfony Web Profiler bundle, which has its own section in the Symfony documentation. It has 36 open issues, 13 of which are bugs, which is pretty good considering it's in use by 477 sites, according to Drupal.org. Now, once the module is installed, it adds a toolbar to the bottom of your site, within which it will show a variety of data for every page. Things like the route and controller that are in use, memory usage for the page, the amount of time to load if you do some additional setup. It can show the number of AJAX requests, the number of queries that were run, and the total query time, the number of blocks visible, how many forms are on the page, and so on. It can also quick link out to a variety of other detailed information that are stored in reports. Now, reports are actually saved into the database so that you can dig through additional details such as request information like access metadata, cookies, session info, and server parameters, in addition to the request and response headers. All of the queries that ran, how long each of those queries took, and even a quick way to create an explain statement to get deeper insight from your database engine. You can also view all of the services available, and with single click, open the class file of that service in the IDE of your choice. This module is a handy alternative to other performance monitoring tools like XHProf, either as a Drupal module or installed directly into your development environment, or commercial tools like Blackfire or New Relic. So let's talk about WebProfiler.
So I don't know if I've used this module specifically or if it was XHProf, but I remember it being quite a chore to set up. How would you rate the difficulty of setting this module up nowadays and seeing it compared to tools like New Relic?
So I think you're probably thinking, Nick, of XHProf, which, similar to Xdebug, is sort of environment specific and can be sort of fiddly to not only set up but keep running as other parts of the environment get updated over time. This one is more straightforward. I think there are some issues in the queue around sort of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, paper cuts that people have run into with some different kinds of, fatal errors and things. And so I've heard some people say running the dev version of the module may be more reliable in some cases, but it's one of those things you'll just have to see if you encounter errors and then try and find corresponding issues.
Okay. I would say it's pretty easy to set up. Luca's book, the Modernizing Drupal 10 Theme Development, actually did like a whole deep dive into it. And is one reason I was a big fan of the book is it wasn't just about theme development. It showed a lot of these tools, like using WebProfiler to see what's going on in a page. And I think even helps with a lot of like theme development, like enhancing twig debug. And it seemed really easy to use. In fact, I was like, oh yeah, I should be using this more. Like instead of just being an Xdebug nerd and always going down into the nethers of the code, it's like I could be using this module to quickly get the bird's eye view instead of always going for like a deeper, more complicated tool.
I'll have to check this out. I mean, it sounds like a really nice way to get it locally too. Whereas like Blackfire, New Relic, usually you have to have on an external, on a host somewhere. I mean, you can't set them up locally, but I don't think I've ever done that for a client.
It costs money.
Yeah.
Is this something I was thinking if you can run as well on production, like New Relic, or is like the implications in terms of performance that you should never do that?
I would never run this on production because it does implement a traceable event dispatcher. I believe that's the right terms there. So that way, when an event is dispatched and kind of goes throughout the system, it's tracked and then that's reported. So it does slow down the site because it's adding a lot more tracing and observability into Drupal itself. Whereas that's where New Relic and Blackfire would give you insight into a production environment plus overhead. But like you could technically flip it on quick and go view a page in production. Like something's not making sense if you don't have other tools available. It's a lot better than copying to a staging environment and writing like var export somewhere and doing debugging that way.
Yeah.
Makes sense. As a side note, you can learn more about Luca's book in Talking Drupal 425. We'll have a link in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you, Martin. As always, you got another great module of the week. And if somebody has a suggestion or would like to ask questions about previous modules of the week, it's the best way for them to get in touch with you.
Thanks, Nick. We're always happy to get nominations for Module of the Week in the Talking Drupal channel of Drupal Slack, but folks can also reach out to me directly on all the social and Drupal platforms as MandClue.
Before you go, Martin, I do want to mention that last week's Module of the Week was Office Hours, and John and I both took credit for mentioning it originally way back in episode 100-something. We have it in last week's episode. And while I was editing the show last week, I thought, maybe I should go back and listen to that previous episode and see which one of us actually brought up Office Hours. And to my surprise, I don't think we actually mentioned Office Hours on that show at all. So I don't know how it became Module of the Week for that episode. I suspect when Stephen was editing the show, he just thought he should find a Module of the Week and threw it in, but I could find no reference. I listened to the first 25 minutes of the show. We didn't mention Office Hours once, and everything else was about Drupal 6 end of life. So I can't say that I can't take credit anymore for Office Hours.
I'm still going to take credit because I know I've used it and I feel like I would have mentioned it at some point, but hey, listen, maybe not.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Martin, and see you next week.
See you then.
All right. Moving on to our primary topic. Alex, let's start with hopefully a simple, straightforward question. What is the Drupal Bounty Program?
So the Bounty Program is a kind of contest or a reward program where the Drupal Association selects a few issues and the number of credits for resolving those issues gets boosted by a few times, say 2, 3, 5 times the amount of credits that normal issue will normally get. It's as simple as that, right?
Huh. That's super interesting. So, I mean, a lot of other communities have like programs. Usually they're like cash prizes, right? But this one is very much a boost in credit, which I think is super cool. And I'm wondering, when did it get started? Is this something that came out of a DrupalCon, or was this a community idea, or how did we kind of get to establishing a bounty program?
Right. So did you mention I only have 1 hour to explain this? I'm joking. So as some of you may know, the Drupal Association is kind of increasing the focus on innovation. And that's the reason I joined the last year with what they call a special board vision fund. Since then, I've been involved in different activities, which you may have heard, like managing the different Pittsburgh innovation projects, doing research on contribution friction, user onboarding, and everything in general related to increasing contribution, right? As part of those activities, we have quite a few conversations with Tim Lennon and the rest of the innovation working group. And those and other topics, and some of the innovation topics that we've been keeping our focus, because actually, as I said, like this is the main focus for the Drupal Association for the I think it's until 2025. So we understood early on that innovation in a way means unblocking and accelerating contribution, right? Drupal is an open source project. It's a very decentralized project. So we rely on the hundreds, if not on the thousands, right? So if you think how contribution works, right? We have hundreds or thousands of people contributing daily to the code base, and that's amazing, right? It makes the project move forward. However, it's a very disorganized way of contributing to a project. There is no necessarily clear priorities, although there are priorities. There is what we call the strategic initiatives. And that means that when you are contributing, you are not necessarily contributing towards the direction that the project needs that more, right? So if you think about this, how it works in the real world, there's no agency or customer that, they have a list of issues and they tell their developers, hey, go and fix tickets. There is an order in that. There is like stakeholders, they meet, they have like a higher perspective, an eyes on the goal. They decide what are the priorities, the tickets, the projects that need to be the focus. Then a project manager will help leading the team following that, to follow that vision, assign tasks, and so on, right? So what happens at the moment is, there is no clear guidance on that. And I say this because not just, I had meetings with agencies and partners, and at some point of the conversation, we will always go to the same point. It's like, hey, I want to contribute, but how can I make my contribution more meaningful, right? How can I bring more impact to the Drupal project? So this bounty program kind of started with that idea, kind of guiding people that wanted to, increase those contributions, and giving some guidance on what is important for the Drupal Association and for the Drupal project as well.
Super interesting to me because, like, when you started out, you were saying, you're responsible for kind of like, cultivating innovation, right? And I'm like, well, how does a bounty program cultivate information? And in your last answer, you kind of highlighted to me like how it works, right? Like if you're innovating and then you come across a core issue or a fundamental issue in Drupal that needs resolving, like that's a blocker to your innovation, right? So like it's interesting to me that the bounty program is kind of here to help remove those blockers, right? To something that, could potentially spur a great deal of innovation in the future of Drupal. So it sounds like this has been kind of in the works for a while, or at least the Drupal Association, with your help, has been kind of thinking of this for a while. Would you say it's been like, a couple of weeks in coming to fruition, or like a couple of months?
This is kind of a realization, right? I don't think at some point we sat together and we thought, hey, let's create a Bounty program. It's more, as I was saying, like conversations between the innovation working group, my one-to-ones with Tim Lennon, then meeting partners, and the partners were giving us that feedback. And at some point I was having actually a conversation with Tim Lennon. And if you think how successful is the credit system, this is kind of a screaming that, right? Let's try to match both, and let's try to, have a good use of both systems.
Cool.
No, I was curious on how issues and tasks are included for the Bounty program. Like coming from my history at Centauro building Drupal Commerce, it was client-driven development. And a lot of times, like clients had needs, that's what focused on issues. And there were always like some of those issues that we know needed to be done, but wasn't bandwidth. And it was kind of up to the community. And like, just like, I'm curious, like how those things are brought in and the decisions made on bringing them into the Bounty program.
Yeah, that was kind of the first discussions on the beginning when we decided to do this. It's like, what is going to be more important? How do we, because this is call it a prototype, right? And we need to show that this is successful because before we go to say a next phase, or we even try to scale this idea. So from those conversations that I was having with Tim Lennon, it was pretty clear that the core team was actually, they had to be involved pretty heavily on what we were doing because they have the high level perspective on what is blocking them, right? Not necessarily on innovation, but at least on what things are important for Drupal at this point, right? So that's from those conversations with the core team, with Tim, this is where we came up with first feedback on if the program was a good idea or not, and second on the issues that they thought, or we thought collectively, that were ideal for this initiative. And we selected issues, not modules, for example, or projects, for a simple reason, just for the reason of being able to manage this at a small scale, right? I think at the moment it's just 5 issues. Imagine if we just launch a whole module, it will be a little bit chaotic in terms of, we want to select exactly what is blocking, for example, a specific module, and see if that works. That's been like quite successful in terms of guiding people on that direction, and also being able for us to measure if this is working, if this is being successful, etc. Right?
Awesome. Yeah, I see this as a great way to solve those issues that aren't necessarily as flashy, but are super important. And I can't remember all the issues off the top of my head, but I remember a few of them, and they're like, yes, we're solving some of the hard problems that maybe people kind of poke at, but it never gets finished, and it just keeps being poked at. And this helps bring things over the line, which actually have like a huge impact, even though they may not be the big flash or super easy to do.
Yeah, and I think it helps with the part that most issues get stuck in with Drupal core is the testing phase, right? A lot of issues get fixed. There's a bug fix, there's a patch, and then nobody either has the expertise or knows or wants to write a test for it, so it never gets merged. But if there's a bounty for it or a multiplier, then there's more incentive to get it across the finish line and write those tests. And I imagine that this bounty is for anybody that's contributed to the ticket, right? It's not like most issue credit. If you get credit on an issue that has a bounty, you get the bounty. It's not restricted to just 1 or 2 people on the issue. I would expect, right?
Yeah, in a way, the core team and the people involved on those tickets have the last say, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end they are the ones that have the context, and they know if someone is legitimately contributing towards fixing this and not kind of gaming the system or doing something they shouldn't be doing or things like that. So yeah, it's not limited to whoever is jumping on the issues. It's at the end, it's if you think the way the contribution system works, is like a teamwork. Let's call it that way.
Okay.
Effort.
And has it been a success?
That's kind of what we've been measuring from the beginning. That's one of the reasons why we selected just a few specific issues. And we've been like catching up frequently with the core team. And what we can see is that thanks to the program, there were some issues that they were sleeping and suddenly they had a spur of activity. Some of them were sleeping for months, maybe, and suddenly you can see that there is an increase in activity, and actually the activity says from the beginning, "Hey, we are contributing to the bounty program." And we also can see that one of the main concerns from the beginning is, okay, the credit system is quite kind of a target for abusing it, right? So there was some fear on the beginning from all of us in terms of, is this going to be the case? People are going to jump here and start doing silly things again and try. But actually, has not been the case, and people has been quite respectful, and the contributions have been geared towards the right direction. And we can even see, I think it was in the second week of starting the program, we had second or third week, we had the first issue fixed. And it was an issue that was going back 5 or 6 years. So if you measure, you put all these things together, I think it's been quite successful enough to, start discussing now about, hey, I think we should extend this program and see what we can do next.
It's almost like self-regulating too on the gaming of these issues, I imagine, because they have such a focus as being part of the bounty program, and there are groups that are interested in actually moving them forward. Like they have that level of visibility where somebody who might be trying to game the system is probably not gonna get involved, I would imagine, because they don't necessarily want that kind of attention. So
I don't know that I 100% agree with that, because I think the reason why we haven't seen that yet is more. We'll talk about some drawbacks and some problems in a few questions, but I think one of the things is that the team has been hyper selective on which issues to choose. Like if any issues closed against a specific module and core, like history, for example, the number of issues that got opened against history in the next week would probably be thousands, because teams trying to abuse the credit system would want to close issues against that.
Yeah, I guess that's what I mean by the fact that it's like a very select set of issues, and there are people that are very dedicated to it, right? Those two things together are kind of working to for lack of better terms, keep the riffraff out. Alex, one thing I was interested in is, so we talked that, the bounty program started with a certain set of issues. And then we have in the show notes your original blog post, and then the extension blog post, but the bounty program was extended, and more issues, I think, were added in. Can you explain why that happened and what that entails?
So the first, let's call it phase, is like a small scale experiment that in a way was designed to prove my theory in terms of, it is not a theory, it's like fact, because I was meeting partners and everything, and I was getting that feedback that needed more guidance.
It was like a proof of concept.
Yes. I love that. Proof of concept. But at the same time, you have to start small, because what we don't want as well is what you are talking about, get a lot of contributions towards the wrong direction, trying to game the system, because at the end that's putting a lot of effort as well on the maintainers, and resources that we have very limited. So we started small, and before even we think about the scaling, we measure, and then we start discussing next what is going to happen, right? Because we started that small and with a lot of feedback from the core team, what we did is just selecting core issues. And probably core issues are not the easiest to contribute to, right? Because they are conversations going back months and even years, very difficult code bases that are difficult for anyone to, get involved to. So in a ways, even it makes sense that we are giving extra credits for people solving those issues, but it's not necessarily helping expanding the reach of this program, right? Kind of opening the possibility for anyone to contribute. And you can see that the people and the companies that have been contributing to this, they are very deep on the community, right? So that's the reason why we are doing this second phase, this bounty program extension, trying to open the reach, trying to open the possibility for more people to join, more companies and more contributors. And at this phase, what I want or what I would love is feedback from the community. That's why I announced, hey, we are thinking about this. Why don't you give us some ideas on, what projects are important for you, what issues you think will push Drupal towards. And I'm always saying innovation, right? Because that's the goal. Although just fixing issues per se, it's improving and it's pushing Drupal forward. I would like to start making people think about not the issues that we have in front of us, but actually features, right? Where is Drupal going? What is going to be Drupal in 5 years or even in 10 years? And I know it's a difficult question, right? But I think it's a good way to start the conversation. And I've had, that's what we are going to do next. Get all the feedback that we are getting, that we can still get. So if you have ideas, please contact us. And and a part of that, by the way, if you look at the innovation page in Drupal, that's something that as well has started from kind of inspiration from the Bounty program, is the contributor guide. So if you go to the innovation landing page, you will see on the right the contributor guide, because what I see as well is the agencies or the people that are involved in the community, they are not always necessarily interested on, hey, I want more credits. They are interested on, I have a few hours. What do I do, right? And before we make a decision on what are going to be the next issues that we are going to give extra credits, I'm already publishing some places, some issues, some probably next week I will publish as well some patches where people could help.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I can see the bounty program just being a universal tool that can help a lot of different areas, right? One is innovation, right? And I can see that. I mean, it's good to test it on a small scale, like you have been, to kind of see how people interact with it. But I can see long term, like something like getting in the new single page preview or something. If there's like a core issue outside of single page preview that's blocking getting that in, maybe the bounty program helps bring focus to that. Or if there's a long-standing issue, like even if it's a long-standing bug in core that just really has stalled out for a long time, maybe, and it's important to get in for some reason, maybe there's a bounty placed. Or, maybe the last 5% of single page preview where it's like, okay, now we got to get the cleanup, now we got to get the extra tests, now we got to get the stuff that's not fun into it. Let's place a bounty, see if we can.
I think I think Alex, your approach is spot on to kind of start small and grow well, not so much organically, but methodically, I guess. Because I see also Drupal's huge. There are a lot of issues. They all kind of need attention. Like I feel like this program needs to be smaller and more methodical in order to really be effective and to keep moving things forward. I'm wondering, so the bounty program was extended. There are more issues that have been added. Maybe I missed this, but was that because the issues that were originally selected have been resolved and taken care of, or just because they were kind of like more technically difficult core issues? I think, was that the gist of what you were saying?
It's just because of that, because they are highly technical. They are mostly focused on core, and this is limiting the amount of people and the amount of contributors with the right knowledge to give back, right? And also because at some point, we have a huge amount of modules in the system. This is good, but maybe there are a few modules in the last pages of that list there is a module that is making a big difference on Drupal, right? I would love people to highlight that. It's like, hey, this module is going to be like a big difference. This is going to be the next layout builder for Drupal, right? Or the next ECA, right? For Drupal. And then we pushed, as a collectively decision, we push that module up.
is there a plan to move this to contrib at some point for some of those kind of key ecosystem projects?
Yeah, so that's the idea. The extension, we haven't yet announced anything because we are deciding, but my idea is that this is going to be including contributed modules. Because at the end is, what's the difference between a contributed module and a module that is already part of the core, right?
Yep.
So we touched on this like a little bit when I talk about like how sometimes issue credits can be gamed, but do you see any drawbacks to the bounty program? And I'm curious about any future drawbacks, you know, like thinking of how other programs have like an actual bounty board where organizations can put up a bounty. Like if it were to grow beyond the DA, curating a set of issues and was more democratic, let you say, for other organizations to put up bounties.
The main drawback that I can think of is the amount of effort that you have to put on this for the next phases. It's like that's why I wanted to prove that this could work and prove it to myself and everyone else as well, because you will need, for the next phases, you will need resources and you will need to decide, as in every company and every organization, what is more important, right? And if we kind of know that this is going on the right direction, it's going to be very easy to convince the board and everyone else that we actually need to do this. The other drawback is what we were already talking about. The credit system is quite popular, and like most of the companies and individuals are respectful and they use it in a meaningful way and they use it right. But like in every city, there are good citizens and not that good citizens. So, and those not that good citizens, they will try to take shortcuts and get extra credits for less work and things like that. So, and that was the fear from when we were trying to organize this, just because as well we don't want to put extra load on the maintainers, right? Trying to police the system. But again, for like so far, it's been, everyone is quite happy with this. We will try to scale it slowly and just making sure that this stays the same way and we don't bring a lot of extra load, and just the opposite. We bring extra pairs of hands to the country systems, to the country modules, and the core, etc.
I can also see like at some point, as far as scaling, right? There needs to be a strict selection process, I think, on some level, where it's almost like the credit system itself too. Like each maintainer needs to kind of select for themselves if there's a particular issue that is worth providing a bounty for. But I can also see at some point the bounty becoming, I don't know, incentive based too. Like what I mean is like I can see a bounty being placed on a particular issue and the issue is just really difficult or maybe not a huge priority for some people. So maybe the bounty just increases over time automatically. Like once it's created, it's a 2x, and then if there's no activity for 2 months, it's 3x. If there's no activity for 4 months, it's 5x, and it goes up to some maximum or something. Or if there's a really important issue, maybe they could just start it at the maximum or something, so that there's some sort of scaling. Like maybe or maybe it's also like based on the difficulty of the issue, right? If it's a really complex non-novice issue, maybe it's a bigger. I mean, there's so many variables to play with. I think this is a great project, but there's so much to think about.
I think one of the keys here is like, let's keep it simple, at least to start, right? I also wonder, based on kind of what we're talking about here, Alex, it sounds like you're kind of managing this, like, this effort at the time, currently. I'm wondering, is there any plan to like have a kind of like a program manager role? Because it feels like as this thing grows and kind of evolves, like it could turn into this thing where like, it's going to need quite a bit of management and care. I'm wondering, like, is the DA committed to that? And like, is there any plan to have a role like that in the future?
Yeah. So like the DA is small, it's tiny, right? I love the phrase that Tim Lennon says, the DA is a tiny but mighty team.
Yeah.
And like the resources that we have is just very limited.
Mm-hmm.
However, there are conversations already happening of people that think that we need to help. We need to have more active role in the community and in the project. Things like having a Drupal acceleration team, for example, where we have developers helping on specific or strategic issues, or a product manager or a project manager. So actually, I think that's close, or like there are conversations already happening on that project manager. The DA Drupal acceleration team could take more time because it will require a lot more funds. But things like this, things like pushing people in the right direction, is something that probably the project will benefit highly, right? So that will depend on the board and
Who can participate in the bounty program? And I don't mean as like, hey, I have an issue that I'd like a bounty for, but I'd like to contribute to an issue that has a bounty. Who's able to participate?
So at the moment, it's very easy. It's just if you are able to, if you think that you can contribute back, just go to the issue, just say that you are contributing in the context of the bounty program, and make sure that you are using the Drupal account that you want those credits to be, credited to. That's kind of obvious. But we are just talking about code contributions, right? We've been having conversations with the innovation working group, and in terms of, there are many things that we need to improve as a project, like the onboarding documentation, or maybe translations, or how to make things easier, smoother, in terms of new people joining the project. Not just contributing, which as well contributing, right? So in a way, I would love to be have this more inclusive and open it to more people, that not just developers, but also people that could contribute to documentation, in translations, and like the same way it's working actually with the credit system.
Okay,
that's the dream. There are conversations. I don't know where or how far we could get on that. So if any one of you have ideas, just
So we talked about kind of the expansion, right? And that, we're bringing, you guys are bringing on kind of new issues. I'm wondering, like, how are these issues being selected, right? So I'm assuming, like, module maintainers can send their suggestions, but they obviously all wouldn't be incorporated. Like, what is there some sort of rubric to say, like, hey, this is a good issue versus this issue, like maybe in a third or fourth round we'll include this?
Because this has happened, or this has started inside my innovation program. What I want, or what I would love, is to have a growing focus on innovation, right? So at the moment, I'm having maintainers sending me their modules, their issues, places where they think it will make a difference, to have this innovation, this bounty program. But I would love to, for that to be a kind of growing focus. And like, so far I've received quite a few proposals. Some of them are innovative, but again, I think we lack of a kind of innovation mentality, in terms of, we see the issues that we have in front of us, and I'm repeating this already, right? But where do we see Drupal in 5 years? Where is it? Doesn't need to be your module. Maybe I'm just browsing around and I find the next module which is going to make a huge difference. I can see, like, some of our SaaS competitors, they are including, just an idea, right? They are including artificial intelligence in their layout builder interfaces, right? And they are doing amazing things, like, hey, why don't you build for me a website or a landing page that has 3 blocks on the left, and the one on the right is floating, and it has this question, and in just 3 or 4 paragraphs, bam, it builds everything, right? That, to me, it would be like an innovation idea.
Yeah,
it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm only open to those ideas, but I would love to see more proposals like that.
It's it's interesting you bring that up, because last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, I was talking with a client, and we were talking about like page layouts, and I was like, wow, it would be really interesting if you could prompt Drupal to say, like, hey, use this layout builder kind of layout, and like, here's what I want to see on it. And then it just kind of went and did it for you. Right. And like, you were like, oh, here's like 2 paragraphs of content that have to be in there somewhere. Right. And it just happens. So that's interesting that you bring that up, because yeah, I definitely think that would be cool. And you know, if there was an issue that was blocking that from happening, then sounds like it would be a perfect addition for the bounty program.
I was going to suggest that you take a look at the Mercury editor ecosystem that's coming out, because I feel like, I mean, there's definitely, I've been testing it quite a bit. There's definitely a couple things that need to be solved, but it's kind of like a new take on, it kind of combines the single page preview functionality, I feel like, with paragraph layouts. I think the piece that really makes it stand out is the fact that it inverts the edit and viewing. So, you know, the single page layout in Drupal core it's like a panel that comes from the right hand side, but it inverts that, where the page you're looking at is the front end, and then you use layout to kind of build the page. So this is a long-winded way of saying I have a lot of clients, a lot of agencies that do a fair amount of like Gutenberg work, WordPress work. And I think this is the first time those types of clients are getting more excited about a Drupal interface than, you know, just the drag and drop, you know, Gutenberg interface that they're used to in WordPress. From an editorial perspective, like I said, there's some rough edges, there's stuff to solve, but it's definitely a space I think that's worth, you know, looking into for innovation.
Yeah, I think
And
content.
that's like what Gutenberg is doing is amazing, right? And the interface is great, but I think we are one step behind in terms of, hey, let's be like Gutenberg. We are looking right in front of us, right? What is Drupal in 5 years? Maybe it's going to be like, hey, Drupal, build me a website for my uncle who is a pharmacist, and they need 5 pages, and they talk about PAM, and in a few seconds you have the website built for you by Drupal. That was kind of the magic that was 15 years ago of Drupal. You know, you could go into a Drupal and you will build without writing a single line of code. An amazing website.
Yeah,
quite flexible and quite scalable.
I definitely think the future is like content for content editors and content layout, right? Follow-up question on maybe I also missed this, but like, how does somebody find like a Drupal bounty program issue? Is there like a tag in the issue queue that they can use to find these issues specifically, or I'm assuming they're listed on a D.O page somewhere, right?
It is listed in the announcement page. At the moment, it's just five issues, 6 issues of them. So at the moment, there is no issue on finding them. But at some point, if the program starts to scale, we need to make a decision in terms of how we are going to manage this. And maybe that's where the contributor guide that I was talking before could come handy, in terms of, hey, this is going to be the main landing page where you can have a look at. Actually, it's already the page where you can have a look at what issues are more important for the project, but those issues are not necessarily linked to the bounty program, right? So maybe at some point we link them together and we have a reference in terms of, hey, maybe it's just a tag, but it will be listed ideally on a centralized place. So it's very easy for everyone. What I was saying before, like this big idea of a project manager who tells the rest of the team, hey, the vision is this, and this here and here is where you will find the issues where your contribution is going to be more impactful.
Take on that, like finding issues, like what do you see the future of the bounty program looking like, or even the fact that now we have GitLab and we're migrating to GitLab issues? Is there features in GitLab issues that makes running the bounty program easier and not requiring like custom development on Drupal.org?
I don't know really, like because we will need to look into how GitLab works. But to me, the ultimate dream will be having some kind of automation and have kind of the bounty program merge into the credit system, right? So I could see, for example, when we were talking, like the core team or specific trusted maintainers tagging specific issues or specific modules where they need help. I could even see, for example, why not in the real world, every issue is different. And depending on the weight of, say, story points of that issue, it's going to get a priority or another. Why don't we give that power to core maintainers, for example, to say, okay, this is going to be a 9 story points, or it's going to be like a huge one, right? So, and we link those credits to the effort, right? Because at the end, it's not the same. Fixing a few lines patch in a contrib module that we were talking before about the issues that we have at the moment on the Bounty program. But again, this requires effort and requires resources that we need to be very strategic, because at the same time that we are doing, if we decide to do this, we are not doing many other things that needs to be done, right? So that's where strategy as well comes into place, and conversations with core, with the board. It needs to be like, a very carefully taken decision in terms of what's the future as well for the Drupal Association as well.
I would say also the different microcosms in Drupal, like there might be a paragraph issue, which somebody seems is very important, but what about the whole commerce ecosystem, for example? There's hundreds of modules, and each little sub-feature has its own set of folks who think it's the most important thing, and maybe it is, but then evaluating that against all the other scopes. So a big effort.
So maybe it's a queue where maintainers select or propose their modules, and then some committee of trusted advisors select which ones will be the modules, right? Because again, at the moment, my focus on this was innovation, but this could be a scale on someone or something bigger, right?
I don't know. I'm pretty excited about. I'm getting pretty excited about the bounty program. It sounds like there's just so much potential. I'm curious if this could eventually become like other bounty programs with cash involved. Like I know Pittsburgh had some for some innovation stuff, and I know that I think there was a bug smash initiative for the Drupal 8 push. I think at some point that involved actual cash. Has there been any discussion about that for something like this?
So not at the moment, or not at this point. And by the way, if you get excited, this gets me very excited because it means that my message is arriving in the right way. And like coming back to the cash prize is kind of what happened with Pittsburgh, right? The idea is kind of planting the seeds, as Dries was saying, let 1,000 flowers bloom. And the amazing thing about that is we put some money there, and the projects have pretty much finished, but the projects are still ongoing. So it is true, we have planted the seeds, and that's it. We forgot about that in a way, but the projects are still ongoing, and the people involved on those, they are still committed and very excited about pushing them forward. So to me, it's not necessarily what we have accomplished, putting some cash money on Pittsburgh, but what we are going to, or what they are going to accomplish, right? What they are doing after Pittsburgh has finished. So I don't see this necessarily as part of the bounty program, because it's kind of a different kind of approaching different problems from different perspectives. But at the end, one of the bigger conversations as well is one that I've been for a long time passionate, which is the open source sustainability, right? And you can see contributors in the Pittsburgh as well, like Brian Perry, who is looking for extra funds, and not necessarily funds for him, which is what I find more inspiring, is funds to find people to help him on the project, right? So there is a bigger conversation in terms of how to bring more money to the ecosystem. Not just Drupal, I think it's a problem for the whole open source ecosystem. And the Drupal Association has that problem at the moment. We need to focus on innovation, but we need money for that. So if anyone is listening and they can put money on innovation, they need all the help that they can get.
It's interesting because I think that the money for Pittsburgh for like a defined project is a little bit easier to divide up. Like whereas doing cash for a bounty would be very different. Like how do you individually get say it's $1,000? How do you split up $1,000 over 42 users that commented on an issue over the last 20 years that just get committed, right? But I think funds that could help this type of bounty program and you've mentioned this a couple of times, is like a project manager, like even just a general project manager whose job on the community side is to kind of groom the issue queue
Yeah.
and help link duplicates together and help identify novice issues. Like, I mean, that's work that the core team does, but the core team also has a lot of really important actual dev work to, well, I guess grooming is actual dev work too, but having a project manager that can just like focus and dedicate their skills, which are different from a dev skills, on the issue queue, I think would be massive. I mean, that I guess that's my ask as a developer. If the Drupal Association, if you can get a project manager or two to like manage the issue queue, that would make I think that would be a huge multiplier to an innovation, because people can get visibility to both the bugs and features that they're requesting.
I think two things are going to make a big difference in Drupal and the Drupal Association. One is the project manager, and the other one is if we manage to have a Drupal acceleration team. Because one of the things I'm doing at the moment is looking at the contribution friction, right? Why some issues are stuck for months. And you can see that strategic ones, they go to sleep for months or for weeks. And then after 3 or 4 weeks, suddenly you have a peak of activity, and then they go to sleep again. While some, I think it was Project Browser where Frown got involved, you could see that once he got involved on that one, the project got solved, fixed in like weeks, right? Why this took years. So align goals for Drupal, which can be managed or kind of collected by the Drupal Association, align that with someone leading towards those goals. I think that's going to make a huge difference in the project.
It's interesting because I see this, like, Nick, as you were kind of describing it, like the dissemination of funds, right, is difficult among like 100 people, 1,000 people, whatever it is. Like I see the bounty program as a great complement to Pittsburgh, because like that to me feels like a great way to spur innovation is like, hey, we have this bucket of money. If you have an innovative idea, we want to fund it. And then through the bounty program, like, hey, you get credit to be able to assist those people that are kind of trying to move things forward in a positive direction, to be able to unblock them and to be able to like kind of push their idea forward. So like I definitely think the complementary program here is needed.
Also, let's not discard completely the association between credits and money. Not necessarily money that you are going to get straight away, but I have the example, for example, in the community in Madrid, the province here in Spain, where in order to grant a specific project, they were using the credit system. So they had a series of points, and one of the things that had more weight on the decision were how many credits that company had, right? So if we manage to have all the governments, all the councils doing a similar thing, we are straight away having a link between credits and money, right? Because you are getting a project that is potentially millions.
Yeah.
And you're getting that because of the credits.
Yeah, it's also another way for like some larger organizations, right, have smaller Drupal teams, right? And it's a way for those Drupal teams to kind of be effective and show that like, hey, we're getting credit and we're moving our way up the the marketplace rankings by kind of contributing to these issues and being able to kind of show that we're involved in the community. So without necessarily having to put in that kind of like that financial bucket of cash, right? So I mean, I think it does have plenty of other benefits, and as you said, Alex, there is some correlation there back to improving your business visibility and your potential to gain business.
Yeah. I mean, the marketplace. I mean, the credit system kind of has two sides, and maybe we're due for a new show in the credit system. But one side of it is, and this is the side that I benefit from, is I get, if I go to my account page, I can see things that I've fixed in the credit, and I, get a little feel good feeling for being able to be recognized for things that I've contributed back to the show, and a similar token, to be able to recognize when people have helped on a module I maintain or be on the show, we can provide credit. The other side of it is for companies, it determines their ranking on the marketplace. So, there's kind of two sides. There's like the individual recognition, and then there's the company roll up. And I think the company roll up is much more directly scales with, financial reward. Although, if you're looking for a job, being able to show actual credit on Drupal.org to a Drupal organization, I think can directly contribute to whether or not you get the job. If you're competing with somebody, all things equal, if you have more credit, you're more active in the community. That might be something that helps tip the scale.
And that's
Yeah.
actually something that is in our hands, right? We are in leadership positions, some of us, and we are in positions where we need to hire someone. So maybe we could start putting that on the job descriptions, which it will be a way to say, hey, start contributing, because this depends. It will
when
help
I
you.
was a decision maker in interviews and hiring, that would be one of the questions I would always ask is like, hey, do you have a D.O profile? Like, what does it look like? Have you contributed? And a lot of times people would say like, oh, I do, but I haven't really contributed that much because most of the work I do is for clients and I can't really contribute it. But there was always a couple that would have a couple of contributions, a couple of issues resolved. And you're absolutely right, Nick. Like, you put two people that are exactly the same next to each other, like, I'm gonna lean towards the person that has more contribution credits and has a better looking D.O profile, just because they're at least making the effort.
It is difficult as well, right? Because you are putting in disadvantage maybe someone that has been committed to a company that they had a mandate of not contributing back or not giving you the time, or even just, if you work in pharmacy or you work on bank, they are very closed in terms of what kind of things you can contribute, and you can get even in trouble on that, right? So yeah, we have to be careful to make sure that we are not excluding,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we could have a whole show about this. Like,
Yeah.
my feeling is like, if your company is if that's your work life, right? There's also that like personal aspect, and I don't necessarily think that like your whole personal life should be overwhelmed with open source contribution, but I feel like there's if you're committed and passionate about it, there's a little bit of something you can do,
Yeah.
But I do agree. D.O profile is not necessarily the end all be all.
I know I wanted to ask. So it's been a few years since we talked about having Drupal core maintainers like sponsored and funded. I think it's been like about 5 or 6 years since I remember that being like a really big topic. But with the bounty program, do you think this could help get core maintainers or even contrib maintainers sponsorship from organizations so we can like focus more on like, hey, we will have you on some sort of retainer to work on issues. And some of those issues will be generic issues. Some will be bounty program ones. And that way the organization can get issue credits and fund open source development.
I think it needs a centralized way to do that, right? Because it is very difficult. First, to get the message across, and second, to organize that. So that's why I was saying, and that's why there are discussions at the moment happening in terms of, we think we need a Drupal acceleration team, because the Drupal Association could, get responsible of getting those funds and getting the message across, and then organize. Maybe it's just, if you think about agencies, normally the way it works when you are in an agency, you have time where you are not necessarily productive or you have time off, right? So maybe it's not about hiring a project manager. Maybe it's about hiring 20% of a project manager. And again, that depends on the needs, right? Maybe actually we need a full-time project manager. That's what I think we need at the moment. But maybe we can afford a full or 2 developers. to work on strategic initiatives. And we have an extra 20%. What do we do with that? Maybe that's a formula that we can, discuss with some of the agencies and, get people to contribute back as well as, fund part or full time of those developers. So I think it's probably another show because it's a big conversation as well.
Well, Alex, thank you for joining us to tell us and our listeners about the Drupal Bounty Program.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I hope, at least I got you excited. I hope I got some more people excited about the Bounty Program, about contributing, and in general about Drupal. So thanks a lot for inviting me.
Do you have questions or feedback? Reach out to Talking Drupal on Twitter with the handle Talking Drupal, or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel.
And you can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. You can learn more at talkingdrupal.com/TDpromo.
Get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about our guest hosts, show news, upcoming shows, and much more. Sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing the Become a Patron button. All right, Alex, if our listeners wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'm on social, on LinkedIn and Twitter. So find me on moreno.net, on LinkedIn as Alex Moreno. And we were having that conversation about the second surname.
Yep.
I think you can find me in just Drupal Alex Moreno. And, yeah,
Awesome.
I'll be happy to help or receive feedback or yeah.
Awesome. And Matt, how about you?
I think the easiest way is go to my website, mglaman.dev, and at the bottom you can find links to all my socials and other various things.
Why am
John?
I not promoting my website as well? Oh my goodness. AlexMoreno.net as well. Thanks, Matt.
Very good. And John, how about you?
You can find me on all the major social networks, as well as Drupal.org at John Picozzi. And you can find out more about EPAM at EPAM.com.
And you can find me pretty much everywhere at NixVan, NICXVAN.
If you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.
See you guys next week.
Have a good one, everyone.